Bye, I love you. I really need to build up his energy right now because this talk is going to be a massive bummer. So there we go. Great. So React India, eh? This has been a fantastic conference, although I have to say I have missed some of it. If you have seen me around at this conference, you've probably seen me stressfully chain smoking somewhere in a corner or pacing around. And if you haven't seen me, it's because I've been in my room making this talk. And you might ask, why would you leave the talk to the last minute? Like, why wouldn't you enjoy Goa? Why wouldn't you do that at home? And the thing is, I did. But this has been a really, really difficult process arriving at the final version of this, and it's not done yet. So this is what I would call a work in progress preview that you are now privy to. And as a closer of a conference, I always feel like there's a responsibility on me to leave you inspired and button up everything real nicely for you. Refer to all the great talks that we've heard, and then like when you go home, you can go like, oh yeah, I remember that guy when he said that like everything's gonna be just fine. This is not one of those talks. So this story begins in a land far, far away this summer at JSConf EU. Anybody here with JSConf EU? All right, there were a few. So if you haven't been to JSConf, it's a very, very special kind of conference because everybody and anybody who is anybody in JavaScript is there. All the major browser folks are there. NPM was there. And Laurie Voss, the founder, one of the founders of NPM, gave this fantastic talk called JavaScript Who, Where, What, Why, and Next. And it was this data-packed talk where he looked at like the way the web ecosystem is evolving. And I really want you to go and watch this talk later. But it blew my mind. Here is a picture of me getting my mind blown over there. But I always knew that React was popular, but I never really knew how big React had gotten until I saw this talk. 63% of JavaScript developers use React in some form. 47% of JavaScript developers use React code basically on a daily basis. I always thought it was just a bubble. I thought it was just a filter that I was seeing all this React usage, but turns out that React is basically crushing it. And if you look at all of these comparisons between different JavaScript frameworks, and by the way, I don't want to encourage competition between them. All of them are lovely and beautiful in their own way. But you can see that, like React, the blue line here, it's going up and to the right. And what you can also see is that, like many of the other, JavaScript frameworks are declining. Compared to the all registered downloads, React, Vue, and Preact are still growing. So there's a certain model that we've discovered, the shared model of React and Vue and Preact that seems to be winning on the web. And Laurie made this statement: React has conquered the web. And I was honestly shocked. I thought it was just my bubble, but here we are. And at the end, he posed this interesting question: is letting React take over the web a good idea? I was a bit puzzled about this question. Well, what is the problem? React is great, right? So during this conference, I took the time to speak to a bunch of folks, people who work in browser teams, standard bodies, people whose opinion I really feel that we should listen to because they obviously aren't dumb people. They care deeply about the web, and they must be pretty smart having gotten where they are. So I'm going to start by paraphrasing some of these, issues that people raised, and then we're going to discuss them a little bit and see if any of them have any kind of truth to it. First one, React is complex and approachable. There is essentially, this like division, that a lot of folks who have been working on the web for a very, very long time feel, which is that React used to be a sort of design-centric web development used to be a design-centric like soft skill. But what we're doing in React land is that we're making it a hard engineering-driven profession. And many people who work on the web don't recognize this anymore, and they want to have nothing to do with this. Another issue is that React is too heavy for mobile devices and networks. I'm sure that here in India, you know a thing or two about having to optimize for mobile. But this is just something that, like many people consider, making React unsound or a bad idea for development on the web. Also, Facebook isn't a responsible guardian of the open web. There's a lot of distrust between people, and you can't really blame them, right? Like Facebook hasn't necessarily has the best track record in all different areas of managing their business. But the one that made me most upset, the one that like personally I think hurt me, was this statement or this idea that React developers don't care about our users. And as someone who spent my entire adult life building for the web, this really caught me deep. But I kept hearing there were so many people whose opinion I fundamentally respect. And by the end of the conference, I was exhausted. Like I was personally I felt attacked. I had this strong, visceral, emotional reaction. And I don't know, that moment I felt embarrassed. I wanted to laugh at myself because it's not healthy to have these kinds of feelings. If you're so attached to a way of building apps for the web that if somebody criticizes it, like it crumbles you into an emotional mess, you probably have personal problems that you need to address at that point. And I realized that I had been using React for a long time, and I hadn't really examined my core beliefs around this. So I started thinking, what does web conquered by React actually look like? Are we doing the right things? What kind of future are we building for the web? And React, in many ways, was a revolution. And if you've ever read any history, what happens is revolutionaries are really, really eager to get into power. But then when they get into power, they have no idea how to govern a society in a sustainable way. And these are some of the questions that I want to ask is how do we do that? And I want to take you along on my personal journey. And in order to understand where I'm coming from, and in order to receive some of this message in a context that I intend, you need to know a little bit about me. I usually don't like to talk about myself, but here goes. So my name is Jani. I'm a software engineer. I'm a software architect, engineering leader. I'm a consultant. For 20 years, I've been writing websites, and for the last 5, almost exclusively with React. In my work as a consultant, this is what that looks like, I've helped dozens of teams migrate to React, figure out how to implement React correctly at large scale. And in this time, I've worked with hundreds of React developers, and I've really grown to understand what makes them tick and what motivates them. And I've seen the good and bad and ugly of React. I've seen how it can be used to create fantastic web experiences, and I've seen how it can be used to create terrible web experiences. I'm also author of quite a few popular open source libraries. I also speak at conferences like this one, and most of my talks have been about React. And at these conferences, I've had the privilege to meet many of the brightest people in our community and kind of understand what do we think about when we think about React. And finally, like the introduction said, I do post quite actively on the website twitter.com, and mainly about things related to web development and React and all those kinds of things. And I'm not here to try to promote my own content. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish a basic set of trust between myself and you. I have discovered that I am part of the React industrial complex. I've been part of the machinery that, in my own small way, I've helped perpetuate the adoption of React onto the web. And it's been great for my career. Like React's rise on those charts, it's also my rise in my career. So there's built-in incentive for me to keep React going. But at the end of the day, we need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to be honest with those that we love. And if React has a problem, I've discovered that I am part of that problem. So today when I say things, and if I say controversial or critical things, please remember that I am focusing on myself and not necessarily on you. But if you feel attacked, then you also probably have some thinking to do. So this is a story of learning where I've been wrong. And it's been a real wake-up call to examine my convictions and biases. In particular, it's been really surprising to discover that I actually agree on things that some of the people that I've made fun of on twitter.com with. And I think it's because they are the other. Like, it's really natural in human tribalism to feel this way, but especially for us coming from the framework wars back in the day where we were stuck on this kind of us versus them mentality where you couldn't admit any fallibility because your opponents would kind of take advantage of you. So what I'm trying to say is that this is a wake-up call, but the call is coming from inside the house. What I want to say is that I'm coming from this from a point of view of somebody who deeply cares about React. I'm not ignorant of it. I have lived experience in it. I'm not promoting any kind of agenda. I'm just here. So are you ready? Can we get the show started? Do you believe that I'm here with good intentions? Good. So I actually agree with many of the React critics. We do not, in fact, care enough about our users. This is number one. Let me explain what that means. If you go to React websites, front and center, it says this. It's a JavaScript library for creating user interfaces. It's a great tagline. Whoever wrote that marketing copy, hands off. It's clear, it's succinct, it's focused, just like React itself. And React has always chosen not to try to solve a category of problems that traditional framework may attempt. It describes how to build an UI, but not how to structure your application or anything like that. And by staying focused and not having an opinion on matters like networking or code-based structure or data management or system architecture, it's a very versatile tool that is also flexible. So different people can use it in different ways. But every coin has a flip side. And it means that individuals and teams that are building on React have to think about this stuff. And in my experience, they do. They think about this stuff a lot. In my work as a consultant, I see different teams at different phases of their React journey and different React adoption. But these are the kind of things that I see people talk about. How do we structure data flow in our application? Do we use Redux, MobX, RX? Do we roll something in-house? Do we use REST or GraphQL or protobufs, CSS, post-CSS, CSS modules, CSS and JS, which CSS and JS library, Emotion, obviously. How do we organize code? Where do we put the tests? Do we mount or shallow render or snapshot or just rely on integration tests like Thomas just demonstrated in Cypress? Do we lead on our type system? Which type system? Should we even be using JavaScript anymore? These are the kind of questions that we as a community think about. And as a conference speaker, I also see that this is it's fascinating stuff. It's really great to come on stage and talk about this stuff because it makes you look super freaking smart. And I'm not going to say that these things aren't important. In order to build good user interfaces and great user experiences, we do need a sound architecture because we remember from the days before React is that over time your software got impossible to maintain, it got buggy, and this is obviously not great for the user. But there's this curious effect that tends to happen is the things that we think about, the things that we talk about also start to sort of inform our prioritization. They become the thing that you think as an engineer that you are responsible for. Whereas I believe that the job of a front-end engineer, any engineer working in creating UIs, is to focus on a lot broader topics. Things like accessibility, usability, performance, security, empathy to the user's needs and desires. And there isn't anything inherent in React that makes these problems appear, but there is something inherent about the culture around React that makes us think this way, and also controls what kind of people are drawn and invited to participate in the development process. This is earlier when I said that some people just people from a classical background, design backgrounds don't feel welcome in the React community because they don't really understand the priorities. And I can understand why. Instead, we talk about I don't know what the goddamn algebraic effects or fractal composition or pro-functor optics or whatever this stuff means. And I think there's a saying, somebody said it, React has turned UI developers into armchair computer scientists. And this kind of functional programming terminology is not inclusive to people at the design and user experience end of spectrum. And this is why Vue is winning in those categories because it's a tool that doesn't have all of this ceremony. But we fundamentally think more about developer experience than user experience. And in some ways, what this means is that we think more about ourselves than we think about the people who we're creating software for. And by the way, don't worry, this whole talk won't be me just about ranting about user experience. We're going to get a lot more specific real soon. And as a result, it is true that one of the criticisms that you hear is that in practice, we ship and execute way too much JavaScript in the browser. And this is one of those criticisms that I've been hearing about React for years, but I have refused personally to admit. It's because it's a really, really inconvenient truth, because it requires you to give up a lot of convenience as a developer in order to start to even begin to address this. How do you, React itself is what, now 109 kilobytes with React and React DOM in the latest version, uncompressed. So, this is already, just by using React, you're already, taking a big step towards that direction. But the evidence is right there. All you need to do is try to use the mobile web on a phone that isn't the latest iPhone, and you know exactly what this means. And fundamentally, why we are responsible for this, we, the React community, React developers, is that we love using React so much that we use it for everything. I do. I've tried to put React everywhere. I've written a YAML syntax for JSX. which are like really, really dumb things to do, but because, like we really love this. And there are very valid use cases for React, use cases where React flourishes. Single-page applications or anything for desktop applications, desktop browsers or Electron apps. These are great use cases. But in my work as a consultant, like one of the things that we do is we do a lot of performance optimization work. We see things like newspapers or government websites who should be prioritizing content and accessibility are instead, for some goddamn reason, shipping 7 megabytes of JavaScript. And we all know this. This is more true in India than it is in most places. Most users browse the web on mobile devices. And they don't have the CPU and memory to cope well with the kind of apps that we're shipping. So it's, for us, we of course know how to solve this. We're clever people. We've learned all the buzzwords. We've been to conferences. We've heard how to do this. Is that, we either need to generate static websites with something like Gatsby, or we, use something like Razzle or Next to SSR, server-side render our website. But both of these bring their own set of issues. And fundamentally, scaling and rehydration speed aren't necessarily solved problems in the general case. For small applications, they are trivial. But then for large applications, they can be heinously expensive problems to try to solve. And most organizations don't really have the maturity to scale and operationalize the SSR pipeline or the static site generation pipeline. And this is massive complexity that, again, takes us away from focusing on the thing that we wanted to do, which was to make a website for the users and make it more in the technical realm. But even if you do this, even if you manage to build this infrastructure, it doesn't really matter because you're only optimizing for the first contentful paint. You still need to rehydrate your JavaScript in the browser in order to attach event handlers and all of that kind of stuff. And the time to interactive on average React websites, especially ones that are built with tons of third-party dependencies, CSS and JS libraries, it is very, very expensive and can have a actually negative impact on your users, not only their ability to enjoy using it, but actually using it. Here in the conference, I'm sorry, I don't mean to criticize this beautiful resort, but the Wi-Fi is a bit crap. And using the internet here has been a bit challenging. And this is basic accessibility. I couldn't put GIFs into the talk for you because I couldn't download them. So thanks, internet. But in order to understand why we are here, why this is an issue, we need to examine one of the other criticisms that people target towards React. And we need to talk about Facebook. I see Sunil. Hey! So the reason why React works very well for Facebook is, well, two reasons. One, because they have beautiful geniuses like Pi here who care deeply about things like user experience. His talk about the image loading yesterday was so good. It's these are the kind of things that we need to talk about when we talk about React, not algebraic effects, but how do you make the loading experience of a website good. But fundamentally, because their use case at Facebook is highly specific, they can ship tens of megabytes of JavaScript, and they do, because how their app works. It's optimized for long sessions, performance during use, return visits. It's not optimized for first page load. And if this is an appropriate heuristic for building your website, you're building a true single page application that works like this, great. But I can guarantee you that every single person in this room who has worked on more than one React app has probably worked on something that doesn't actually fall in this category. I sure know that I have, and I have shoved so much React in it. But most importantly, Facebook.com, Instagram.com are primarily desktop applications. Mobile web isn't, and for the foreseeable future, it most likely is not going to be a priority for Facebook because they want to drive their mobile usage to their native apps. Who here actually uses Facebook.com on their phone, like the website? And do you use Facebook.com or do you use Facebook Lite? Anybody use Facebook Lite? Okay, cool. So there was a few hands up. This is it's not a huge amount of people. And Facebook Lite, which is I don't know the numbers of it, but which is targeted for the actual low-end phones. It's a classical progressive enhancement website. It's not even built in React. And fundamentally, mobile web is only one example of this thing, which is that if something doesn't benefit Facebook, it is not a priority for Facebook. And when people criticize React by saying that Facebook isn't a trustworthy guardian of the open web, in this respect, I do agree. Some people distrust Facebook for other crackpot reasons, because they think there's a global conspiracy going on or something. And then fundamentally, I don't blame them. Like the company doesn't have a great ethics track record. The company doesn't have a great track record in privacy or trying to do the right thing by the people. But fundamentally, there isn't a great conspiracy. It's just a company, right? They've, got something out of it by making React popular or, React accidentally becoming popular, which is that helps them compete for talent, but doesn't make it evil. That's just good business. They're not paying millions of dollars a year to the React core team just to make the web better. They're building things to serve their business needs, and this is just how businesses work. But there are a few interesting parallels here that we do need to kind of consider, which is that you can also cause harm unintentionally. Like just as Facebook and Instagram have completely redefined the web, everyday people, non-techie people interact with the internet, React is redefining the way the makers of the web interact with the platform. And we as a community, we've largely outsourced the responsibility of pushing the web forward on React. I don't know if this is just me. Maybe all of you are actually a lot more intrepid. Maybe you are looking at things that are outside the React realm. But for me personally, I feel like there's this kind of like certain complacency that happens. They have so many incredibly smart people. How can we do anything better than them? Let's just wait for them to ship 16.11 or whatever. And I don't think this is a good idea because we do need innovation in areas that aren't priority to Facebook. And as long as we turn to React for these solutions, we, some of the brightest minds of generation, present company excluded, are not exploring the problem space, in a kind of like wider sense. And the web platform is developing rapidly. There are new innovations that we could be taking, advantage of. There are new sort of like touch points in the broader web community that we could be using. But, they aren't priority for React, so they don't get on our radar. So what should we do about it? What should we as a React developers, as a React community, do about any of this stuff? Assuming that any of this is true. I don't know if I've still convinced any of you, but let's assume that some of these problems are problems worth addressing. What do we do about it? Do we stop using React? I mean, this would be a great way of closing the React conference, right? Go like, boom, motherfucker, don't use React. No. If we did, what would we, use instead, right? Like, if the only goal was to move away from, Facebook-affiliated, software, we could easily switch to one of the React clones like Preact or Inferno, or one of the micro apps like HyperApp or Vue even. Or we could just fork React and put it under OpenJS Foundation and, put it under open governance model and let's see how we can compete head to head against, the military might of Facebook engineering. But, you could do this today and many people do. They build software just fine with our React. That's not the problem. The problem is that the whole attitude of oh no, the politics is broken, let's just burn the society down and start from scratch is not really a constructive thing. Like you actually fundamentally, as a member of a civil society, you do need to try to fix issues from within the society. That is the only actually reasonable way forward, no matter how hard it is. And the problem here is that individual choice does not affect the ecosystem. Whether you or I boycott, React, it still continues to be chosen by businesses and developers at large scale. And besides, I really want React to succeed. All those developer experience wins that we talk about, so the core component model of React is still, in my opinion, the most productive way of building applications for the web. And a lot of the issues that we have in the React community, as I'm soon about to discuss, are actually sort of peripheral to the technology itself. They are cultural issues and they are issues that kind of arise from incentives and prioritizations. So yeah, I want React to succeed, but even if we wanted to go backwards, we couldn't, because there is no known way for us to incentivize a group of people to do something that they don't see the benefit of. The issue with the whole conversation between the web platform people and the JavaScript framework crowd is that the web platform doesn't really have any new solutions. Web components were supposed to be that, but they haven't really proven to be successful in the great marketplace of ideas. So the best, anybody who wants to criticize React from outside the community, those quotes that I put on earlier, is that, they say use less JavaScript, do less in the browser and you're good. But that is the austerity approach to web development, and it's not going to work because we just can't systematically go backwards. Humans aren't incentivized to do that. We must go forward. So what does that look like? I'm just kidding. So building React into the browser would be a monumentally bad idea. I don't have a lot of time to go into details as to why it is, except to ask you the question, which is, I think Tomas, at lunch the other day asked me, is like, what would have happened if we had standardized Backbone into the browser? I thought Backbone was freaking great. We would be exactly in the same place where we are with web components right now. We would not, it would not solve the problems that we actually have, and we'd be back to solving them in userland and talking shit about how, the thing that the web platform provides doesn't work. And so I want to take a brief detour to this whole kind of idea of what is userland and what is platform. Because userland is essentially where rapid innovation happens. This is where teams like the React team or anybody who wants to try out things, where they can move really, really fast and try out ideas and have very little responsibility. There's no governance. Best marketers win in the short term, and good solutions tend to stick in the medium term, but we have absolutely no idea what will happen in the long term. On the other hand, platforms are very slow to move because they're bureaucratic, they require participation of multiple parties, and they need to consider any new features very, very carefully because once they're implemented, they're never going to go away. But on the plus side, they're stable to build on. It's easier to make performant because features can be implemented natively. And it's better for network and JavaScript parse performance because it requires to ship less userland code. But getting features into browsers is very, very difficult because of this process. But most importantly, it's very, very difficult to know what features to build into the browsers. So what I think we should really do is steal all of React Good's ideas and build them into the browser as individual APIs. Because if you look at React, it's constantly evolving new ideas. Things like hooks didn't exist a year ago. Things like concurrent mode didn't, well, it actually still doesn't exist. So what we can say for sure is that like some basic ideas of React, are probably proven. Like how long have we now been building apps in the winning, sort of like if you just look at the charts, the winning React Preact view way, which is like you have a declarative model. I guess, we're pretty sure that that is something that's going to stick around. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't want to go into details now, because I don't really know where we should draw these lines. But fundamentally, if we had some kind of API that takes a data structure and updates the DOM with it and we don't need to ship, React DOM, that would be pretty cool. Some sort of reactivity model to, update the UI. JSX or something like that so we can transpile in our code because ES6 is now supported by all evergreen browsers. And one of the only reasons why we actually need to Babelify our code is to use JSX. And things like schedulers for concurrency are already underway. There's like Facebook engineering, they really applauded themselves really hard. They patted themselves in the back because they managed to make a proposal and ship it in the Chrome origin trial. It's called is input pending, and it's a good API. It has the opportunity of essentially making user-facing websites more responsive on the web. And the good thing about this, why I really actually do think that it's worth an applause, is that it's a feature that can be used by React, but also by Vue or some hypothetical new framework or just individual developer writing vanilla JavaScript. And this way of experimentation that we do in userland, where we test ideas, in the great marketplace of ideas, it can benefit a plurality of frameworks once, like we standardize it. And it's fundamentally going to be more robust for the health of the open web. But, it's always a but, isn't it? Should have counted how many buts there are in this talk. There's one problem that we do fundamentally need to solve. And it's quite possibly the most important problem that we as a React community need to address. All of that stuff I talk about standardizing parts of React, we're talking years and years and years of hard work, of uncertain things. When the ideas finally would get out there, some of them could be rejected by the time they could be already deprecated. But even to begin this process, even to begin like how do we actually reunite the React, the Conqueror React community with the conquered, which in this case is the web. We need to address this problem, which is that we aren't communicating well with browser folks. And when I mean we, I don't mean the React core team. And when I say browser folks, I don't mean the working groups in which Facebook and all of these people participate. What I mean is just shit posting like this. This is an actual thing that was posted by a person who works on one of the teams that makes one of the main browsers. I don't want to name and shame them, but I think we can agree that this is pretty much of an asshole thing to say. Like, it doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not, but if your goal is to influence other people's behavior, I think, what's the saying, honey is more effective than vinegar, and this one really left a bad taste in my mouth. And not surprisingly, the React community responded in kind. Again, I don't want to name and shame anyone in the community, but let's just say, I was one of them. And this is the exact kind of stuff, that I am not proud of. The thing that I kind of feel like after I reflected myself, after having caught my own sort of biases and tribalism, this is exactly the kind of bullshit that we should not be. Most of you don't, but we as a community, we kind of feel, that this is justified. And it's because, we have created a culture of mutual distrust and disrespect, not only between React and the web, but also the entire kind of JavaScript framework community, the way of building applications, that we generally tend to find productive, and the people who are in some way trying to control sort of the purity of essence of the web platform. And this is really, really sad because fundamentally, all of us, we have the same shared goal, which is to write code for the web platform. And we just have slightly different ideas on how it should be done. It's like the big endian versus little endian argument. Genocides are always, between people who, have a complicated relationship. It's never about between people who, don't really know each other. And as long as this mutual disrespect continues, people in our community, won't be open to changing their minds, or we won't want to contribute to the web platform because we don't see that we're getting the due respect that we think that we deserve. And they don't want to hear our ideas because, they don't believe that our goals align with theirs. And the problem is that this goes to the very, very beginning of React. We have convinced ourselves that we don't need the web platform because we can just work around it. The entire concept of React is essentially a big workaround for the limitations of the web platform. It's very, very clever. And a lot of the people, including myself, who rocked in this community early on, kind of took pride in the fact that, we are doing things differently. But the thing to remember, and here I should have put the meme, the guy doing this meme, you can't build web apps if you don't have a web, right? And whatever we think about the technical merits of the web platform and browser APIs, the continued health of an open, democratic, independent, non-corporate controlled web is fundamentally important. Because it's the only platform where you can publish content without censorship. This is not a technical conversation. This is a conversation about access and conversation about who is enabled to do what. The web is not going to suddenly disappear, but it can be made redundant. It can be deplatformed, so to speak. Already today, a huge share of internet users, people who interact with each other or with content on their devices, aren't actually using the web. They're using the walled gardens of mobile platforms. They're using apps like Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever. And if the companies behind these services deprioritize web as a target, that means fewer and fewer users will actually have reason to visit the web, which means that we won't have the kind of resources, the kind of incentives to keep it running. So we, the community of web developers, and at this point, I want to make sure that we understand that, even though I've been using this highly polarized sense of the web community versus React community, but we are web developers. Unless you're just writing React Native or whatever, in which case that's cool too. But this talk is not for you. So it's us individuals that need to be responsible, not corporations. And one of the kind of fundamental things, this is probably things that people hear in therapy. We can't change how others act, but we can change ourselves. We cannot magically make other people respect our points of view or believe that, we are right. But what we can do is to choose how do we behave ourselves. We as a community need to get change our priorities and our outlook. We need to get to a place where we can make engineering decisions that are good for the long-term health of the web. And this means having different conversations that we do right now. fundamentally we have to get our house in order. But just like we can't change how others outside of like our little micro community act, we can't just tell others in our community what to believe and act. Like I can't just tell you what to do and then you will do it. Or if I could, that would be pretty cool. But there's a theory of understanding behavior of humans at like large scale, and that's called economics. And if you ask an economist, the best way to influence the behavior of a group of people, they'll say it's incentives. It's essentially the system between behavior and rewards. And I feel like I have been fundamentally rewarded for behavior that isn't going to be productive for the long-term health of the web. It's not going to be productive in conversation. It's not going to be productive in many ways. By being part of the React industrial complex and being blind about, not questioning my own assumptions, I have essentially personally gained a lot. And the main incentives for behavior for developer communities are money and respect, I believe. There could be more, but there could be sex, but I don't know how you can get that with JavaScript, so I'm guessing it's money and respect. And money incentives means that you exhibit certain qualities or possess certain skills, you are more likely to be more employable or command a higher salary. I think this is something that we need to fix, but it's very, very hard to fix directly. But what we can do is that we can manipulate our behavior by influencing what we as a community value, what we respect. I'm going to move here so you can take photos of me in front of this slide, and then everybody can get angry at me on the internet. Sorry. We have to stop all of this. We have to stop idolizing public speakers and internet thought leaders and people who like myself in the React industrial complex stand to gain a lot by promoting themselves and the way that they think that we should build. Like anybody who owns a company that runs, I don't know, like for example, some kind of training for React, I don't know what a company like that would be called, then they are probably going to have some kind of incentives that are going to, avoid, like be just like for me, very, very difficult for them to kind of like question their sort of like ideas. And instead we should reward people who focus on the core science of creating better user experiences for the web. I'm going to have to move a bit quickly here because I'm over time, but I'll tweet about this later so we can get more detail into it. But fundamentally, we also need to stop rewarding people who create new open source libraries purely for fame and recognition or so that they can put it on their CV or get a job. And instead, we need to reward with attention those who perform the hard and unthankful civic duty of doing the work in standards bodies. Like, how do we make that sexy? Like, this has always been a problem for any society, is like, how do you ensure that the brightest minds of your generation go into civic work and public work? How do you make sure that they don't just go to the private sector and get rich and destroy the society by creating inequality, right? And we don't have necessarily a solution to this, but I have some ideas that I can also talk about later. But like fundamentally what we need to do is that we need to stop rewarding the kind of myopic views that seek to uphold the status quo. We need to cultivate more diverse points of view that challenge our existing assumptions and how software should be built. Because where our community is right now and where the conversation is and where our like minds are when we're building software and like how do we relate to sort of like the society that we live in, it's a result of monoculture. It's the same few people, usually people who from a demographic point of view look something like me, defining the tone of the conversation and what we as a community focus on. And instead, we need a broader understanding of the challenges and opportunities, for the open web and our engineering culture. And we're not going to get it from us. We're not going to get it from me. And also, being here in India, I don't know. I would love to hear more points of view from all of you. I know you already have those. I just don't see them. There's this kind of global disconnect in conversation. A lot of this stuff is obviously like very, very complicated and deep-seated, like, the whole kind of power dynamic between the, the emerging markets and, the sort of like so-called Western world. But fundamentally, these are the kind of like things we need to fix. We also need to have more women as part of the conversation. We need to have people who are underrepresented in any way as part of the conversation. And what we as a React industrial complex, like anybody who has even a little bit of a voice and a little bit of a platform, whether it's on a public stage like this one, or whether it's on an internet platform like Twitter, or whether it's just in your own team and in your own sort of room that where you are in, is that we can help and raise and amplify, you know, those voices that actually dissent against the basic idea. Like, we, as a society, have gotten to this weird point where if somebody disagrees with them, when they would disagree with us, we just yell at them and shut them out. Like, we know this from politics. Like, I'm pretty sure, I don't know much about Indian politics, but I'm guessing that that you guys have a bit of a disconnect between different worldviews and which prime minister, you know, you would like to see in power and all that kind of stuff. And this is true globally everywhere, but, you know, this is not going to be, you know, healthy and sustainable for us. And, you know, we fundamentally need to make empathy and inclusivity our core values. When people speak, we need to listen to them, no matter who they are or whether we agree with their, you know, premise. We need to be open to having open conversations, and we need to shun prejudice and toxicity. And now, so I'm going to start wrapping this up. For me, this has been largely, you know, like an exploration of a journey that I've been on. I don't know if I've managed to quite communicate the kind of, I think I've absolutely failed to communicate the gravity that I've internally felt having to face some of these biases that I've felt. Because they are my deeply held convictions, and, you know, it hasn't been a fun journey, but it's been extremely valuable. And, you know, if you examine your beliefs and your convictions, you would probably have a, you know, highly different experience because your lived experience is different than mine. But whether or not any of these problems, you know, that, you know, I quoted other people saying and then sort of like confirmed that I have actually now seen the light of, whether any of these resonated with you, I do sort of implore you to be open to changing your mind in whatever it is that you believe in. And there are things that are, you know, core values. Like I said, like we need to make empathy and inclusivity our core values. These are probably not things that we should be questioning. I think there are like some sort of like core things that we should hold dear. But there's so much that we implicitly just believe in that we fall into these traps of. And I don't know. I guess openness, it starts with listening. It starts with, like, if we talk about like how do we even begin to contribute to the web platform, like if you were, you know, like in some way like inspired or thought that, hey, you know what, this would be actually a really good idea to get these React APIs into the browser, like how do we even begin doing this? And fundamentally, like any kind of transformation, it begins with listening. It begins with listening to ideas that sound scary. It begins by listening to voices that aren't usually heard. And you know, from there, you can kind of move on. But until we have that dynamic, we're not getting anywhere. So I think I've spoken enough now. Maybe now it's my turn to listen. I would love to hear your thoughts after the talk, at the after party, on what I said here today, where especially I would like to see where I'm wrong, where I've made assumptions, where again, my own biases and my own blindness have made me jump into conclusions that aren't true. And I promise you that even if we disagree, I won't feel bad about it because I'm looking at this thing slightly differently now. So thank you very much, and let's see you at the after party.
This video recording was brought to you by Twilio. We allow you to integrate different means of communication such as video, chat, or SMS into your React applications. If you want to learn how you can send SMS directly from a React chat, check out this video on the right or go to our Twilio YouTube channel. And if you want to watch another React India talk, we picked one out just for you over here on the left. Thanks for watching!